Welcome to Scary Stories. I'd like to say that this has been a fun month. I'd like to say that, but then I would be lying. This month has been horrible. The best thing I can say about this February is that it's finally ending. But there were some really good stories on our channel this month. Of course, YouTube didn't send out notifications, so nobody watched them. For example, here are my 4 favorite stories of the past 28 days. I hope you'll like them too. I know you haven't seen them before. I saw the view totals on their original uploads. Please join me in thanking Godzilla Tim, CS, Butch Rudrick, Kathy Barrickman, and all of our PayPal Club and channel members who helped make this special 1-hour episode possible. And now, without further ado, Bigfoot's 4 favorite Dogman stories of February. Hit it, Smokey. I woke up a sleeping dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have one crazy story for you on your channel already filled with crazy stories. This one happened to me about 10 or 11 years back when my family first moved to the country. Well, it's the suburbs, but we're in the neighborhood of a few big natural areas in Pennsylvania. In fact, this story I'm about to tell you took place when I sorta ran away from home and was secretly hanging out in the Ferncliff Peninsula Natural Area by the Youghiogheny River in Dunbar, Pennsylvania. Assuming you're unfamiliar with Dunbar, and who isn't, it's located in the southwestern corner of PA, pretty close to West Virginia, home of the Mothman, and to the northwestern strip of Maryland. It's directly midway between Cleveland and Washington, D.C. or Baltimore, which are all about 200 miles away. You can usually do that in under 4 hours if you get lucky with traffic. But for our story, maybe the most interesting thing to note about Dunbar and the Ferncliff Peninsula Natural Area is that it's all located in that eastern mountain range that so many scary and weird stories seem to have taken place along. Those are interesting hills and fascinating valleys, believe you me. And I'm about to tell you something that happened to me right inside that very ancient and mysterious place. Now, this location, the Ferncliff Peninsula, it's mainly known for the wild waters over there. You've got some waterfalls, you've got some rapids, and some dangerous to navigate waters. For me, though, I never cared for those areas in my younger days. There were usually too many people there, and the peninsula was where I would get on my moped and disappear too, when I didn't want to be around anyone anymore. I was mad at my family almost every day back then, just for moving to that area. Not that things were particularly bad inside my family. It's just that I was a teenager, and I was going through things. We had lived by Philadelphia in the east, and I lost all my friends with this move. Sure, some of them stayed friends with me online for a while. Social isolation can be harder to take when you're that age. So I was extra moody. I would go off to the woods to be alone. And usually, that was exactly what I would be. Alone. So this one cold day, in either late autumn or early winter, I was walking off the path through the woods, going through the places they would prefer you to not go through. That time of year, you have some patches of snow, you have some muddy ground, you do have some dry dirt, and you have a whole lot of slippery, icy rocks. I was staring at my feet and watching my step when I saw a big old black and white fallen tree that looked like it was just itching to have my butt sitting down on top of it. I walked over toward the log, but as I approached, I could see some kind of large, furry, brown animal sleeping on the ground, hidden just behind this huge fallen tree. I admit, I had never seen any large animal on the peninsula before, and I was quite surprised. I stopped short on the muddy dirt and slipped. My feet flew forward, out in front of me. My butt landed hard on the mud, instead of on that fallen tree, as I had intended, and my right foot somehow got tangled in something. I leaned forward to try to understand what I was stuck on. And I saw there was a tree root that came up out of the ground, looped in the air a few inches, then looped back down under the ground. That was what my foot had slid through. It was pretty hard, and it was holding my ankle anchored to the earth, as well as if it had been designed to do just that. I didn't even know if it was connected to a tree that was still alive. The soil can really get rocky on the peninsula, so you see roots growing up into the air and then back down all the time, because they're just trying to get around the rocks and stones. This one root might have been lying there since before I was born, just waiting to trap me in this situation. I tried to shake my foot free of its root prison, but I ended up accidentally kicking the log instead. The log that the furry creature bigger than myself was sleeping just beyond. Yeah, that log. I heard the creature making noises, as though its breathing had just been interrupted. It was waking up because of me. I held still, and I held my breath. Slowly, the bear-sized animal settled back into its slumber on the other side of that big old white and black log. I had just dodged that bullet, and I didn't want to make the same mistake again. Taking out my pocket Swiss Army knife, I started working at that root, aiming to take a slice into it and get my foot freed. I needed to get out of there before that creature woke up and made the point moot. I had been depressed and lacking motivation in my life until I found myself in this situation. Suddenly, I was the most motivated young man in all of PA. The next part of this story is the weirdest part. I don't blame you if you don't believe this one, because two different people I told the story to in person both had a problem with this part. Nevertheless, I am not clever enough to come up with a substitute scene here, so I'm gonna just have to tell it to you as it happened. This guy, a total stranger to me, came stumbling upon the scene. He did not approach from the same direction I had. Instead, he came from sort of to my right and sort of in front of me. He came through some bushes and saw me just as I saw him. Initially, he was surprised and alarmed to see a stranger sitting on the ground the way that I was. He could also make out that my foot was being trapped under the looping root, and so his brain added 2 plus 2, and his face relaxed. Thinking he understood the entirety of the situation, he started marching over toward me with vigor. No doubt, he intended to do his good deed of the day and to free me from my trap. The thing is, he was walking directly toward that sleeping animal, and so I silently waved my hands in the air to try to warn him to stop. As I did so, the man looked confused. Then he took one more step, changing his perspective enough that he could see what I could not, which was the big brown furry animal snoring on the other side of this big log. When that man's eyes looked down at the sleeping beast, those eyes dilated, and he screamed a squeal so high-pitched that it still pains me to think of it. He ran back the way he came, still screaming like an operatic soprano as he retreated. This probably hurt the animal's ears even worse than it hurt mine, as the beast snorted and rumbled as it sat up in the same way that a human being might sit up. My first split-second impression as I saw the animal peripherally was that I was seeing an ape. My mind must have made that connection because it sat up like a human, or a primate might. Even before my eyes shifted over to look at the thing directly, my mind was telling me that gorillas and chimps are not brown like this thing was. I knew already it wasn't any kind of ape, and the adrenaline and panic inside of me started mounting. From this point, I was no longer thinking logically for a while. My hands were shaking. I felt flush. I wanted to cry, and I kept thinking about weird details from my childhood that I had forgotten years ago. I realized that meant my life was flashing in front of my eyes. And when that happens, it means your system is accepting that you might be about to be reaching the end of your life story. The chances of that big animal turning out to be a vegan seem pretty small, and so my subconscious was going over the final bookkeeping from my mind and getting ready to go work on our reincarnation or whatever it is that happens next. And then I looked over directly at that big beast as it sat up, and I thought that it must be some kind of a strange bear, except that it just really was not a bear. It was like a dog, but it was the size of a bear. It bared its teeth at me and growled, and I'm not ashamed to say that I evacuated on the spot. Well, I mean, my bowels did. I would have evacuated too, but I had my ankle tangled in that thick root still. The animal on the other side of that log growled and snarled until its eyes met mine, and then it got the weirdest expression on its face. It looked sort of confused and sad for a second, and it sat up further, looming well above me now, and looking down at the situation. At that point, it did this thing that demonstrated that it was most definitely canine. It kind of yawned, this giant yawn. Then it panted and smiled, letting its tongue hang way out of its mouth, as its eyes were mostly shut. I thought it was just a dog being a dog, but it eventually stopped this panting and opened its eyes again. You know, for the rest of this story, it hardly ever had its tongue hanging out of its mouth again. It only happened after a couple of other yawns later on. I got the impression at the time that the beast was laughing at me, but I know that sounds stupid. Anyway, it did that laugh-like panting. Then it started climbing back up from its prone position. Dead leaves from years prior clung to its back and fluttered, falling all over as it slowly regained its full height on all fours. Then, leaning on a tree, the beast rose up further until that dog was somehow managing to stand up on only its two hind legs. A big dog is always so much bigger when it rears back on its hind legs, but this one was standing comfortably up like that. He continued to stretch and yawn and make funny dog noises each time he did so. I was terrified. I worked that Swiss Army knife furiously at the root. It kept holding me tight to the spot, and I was still only beginning to cut through it. I didn't see that dog thing's hand until it had already reached down and stuck its finger into the scant space above my ankle and under that root. I think if I had seen him reaching down toward me, I would have died of shock and fright before he even did it. And yes, this dog that stood up did actually have fingers. It stuck the equivalent of its index finger into the loop, and then, with one mighty tearing pull, an entire length of root, extending a dozen feet in two directions, was loudly ripped up out of the earth, covering both of us in an explosion of both wet and muddy dirt. It did free my foot, however, and I pulled a few feet back from the canine man to lick my wounds. I wasn't sure if the creature was freeing me so he could eat me. There wasn't much I could do about it in either case. I couldn't put any weight on that ankle yet. I had banged it up pretty badly. And so I sat there rubbing it and listening to that Dogman making a wheezing sound. I looked up at him, and he was covered in mud and dirt, with a dust cloud still settling all around us. He was sneezing. I was coughing, but he seemed to be enjoying the hell out of the entire situation. I swear this seemed funny to that giant beast man. I assure you, though, whether he really was laughing or not, I most definitely was not seeing the funny side of things. Painfully, I crawled away to a nearby tree, where I began to force myself up into a standing position. I was fine as long as I held onto the tree, but anytime I tried to put weight on the ankle, I saw bright lights, and I felt some sharp, pain. I didn't think I had damaged the ankle too seriously, but I was going to have to rest it a good long time before I was going to be able to walk out of that forest under my own power. On the other hand, I didn't feel I had the option to rest because I had some kind of a wild canine ape-man monster lurking just behind me that was probably going to eat me for lunch next. I was very scared and jittery. I was shaking all over, and I needed to change my pants and take a shower. Let's face it, I was in bad shape. I had thought I was tough, but I had already fallen apart just because I was seeing a big animal. My father and my grandfather had both seen battle by my age, but I couldn't handle a big animal waking up. I felt like I had just shamed myself and my entire family. 10 minutes earlier, I would have told you that I hated my family and that they were stupid. In that moment, though, I missed them so badly, and I wished I could apologize to every one of them before this creature finished me off once and for all. As I watched, the creature backed into an old tree and began scratching its back against the bark in the way a bear might do it. That was when I realized how strong this thing was. The entire tree bent when he pushed into it. I heard things fall out of that tree to the ground. I think I saw a nest fall. It was out of season for whatever bird had built it, so at least no young ones fell out. This dog-headed, hairy humanoid giant was like a bull in a china shop. He was knocking things over and down all around him, and he seemed to be very entertained and amused by the entirety of it. Looking back, I would have to say this was a very joyous creature. Of course, I could not appreciate that in the moment because I was injured, and I was terrified at what easy game I would make if that animal man decided to take me down. In a panicky way, I started stabbing the tree near me with my Swiss Army knife, trying to look tough and scary so that the canine monster man would give me some space. I swear he seemed to think that was funny too. I couldn't laugh along with him though because I was figuring he would also think that tearing me in half and enjoying me for a snack might get a big laugh out of him just as anything else might. I desperately needed to get back to the human world that I had run away from, but my ankle hurt too much for me to be going anywhere just then. The dog-headed ape man walked over to me, staring at me in a weird way. I was terrified, but too injured to move. I held tight to that tree as I realized the creature man was staring at something to the side of my eyes. I held perfectly still as he slowly reached out his hand, which had 4 clawed fingers and one long dew claw set back, which functioned like a thumb, forward, closer and closer toward the side of my head. Honestly, he was moving so slowly and not looking me in the eyes, but clearly staring at something else that I felt like I'd felt at times when people were about to brush a bee off me when I was younger. When the man-thing's huge clawed hand paw was to the side of my head and out of my view, whack, the hand struck my head lightly and quickly pulled back, holding something I could not see. The beast man then tossed whatever it was into his mouth and chewed the crunchy thing loudly. Again, I was reminded of when I was a young child, but this time I was thinking of my uncle pulling a quarter out from behind my ear when he did his little magic tricks. Had that dog-headed animal man really just pulled a bug out of my hair and eaten it? Or had I just witnessed it performing the same magic trick as my uncle? I wasn't sure if the dogman was really as intelligent as he seemed to be, or if I was projecting this intelligence onto him, because he was shaped like a large human being, just as much as he was shaped like a big dog. In either case, he had not hurt me as he grabbed that bug. And he did have every chance too. I was still shaken all over, but I wasn't as certain that he wanted to eat me. Bugs he definitely wanted to eat, but I hadn't seen him act like he wanted to dine out on me just yet. And so the next time this giant dogman cautiously approached me, bent down, I didn't stab at him with my Swiss Army knife. Instead, I put that away. The creature's head was down below my eye level, and I took this to mean that he was behaving submissively. I pat him on his head, and I found his fur to be rough, like a junkyard dog's. As I was enjoying what I mistook as friendly behavior on the part of the dogman, it maneuvered me into a position where it could get its head and neck under my legs. I had no idea what was happening, and I just thought the animal was playing with me, until suddenly I was tossed in the air like a salad, and I found myself landing on the dogman's neck, back, and shoulder. He took off running, with no warning, and I clung on tenaciously, as you can imagine. I realized he was not holding me onto him. I had the option of jumping off any time I wanted to. Of course, I was going to have to try not to land on my injured ankle, and I was then going to have to sit wherever I landed until I could walk again. The dogman might be bringing me to his kill cave to eat me, but he wasn't forcing me to go. He wasn't carrying me against my will. To me, that implied that his intention was to do something for me, something that I would want done for me. And when I got dumped unceremoniously outside a ranger station I had never seen in my life, I knew for certain that I wasn't going to be getting eaten on that day. I looked around, stupidly wanting to thank the dogman, but of course, he had finished his good deed for the day, and he had sped off to go back to being a dogman doing dogman things. Inside, I spoke to someone in some kind of uniform who called my mom and told her to bring a clean change of clothes with her when she came to pick me up. It was then that I smelled myself for the first time. The uniform woman directed me to a shower and handed me a big towel. You know, these days, my wife hates the way I tell this story. She says that people don't need to know that my mommy brought me clean clothes. She wants me to tell the story in a more macho way, to cast myself as a brave and heroic victim of ankle injury, or something. My son, on the other hand, likes the smelly parts of the story best, as any of you with young boys can probably imagine. Well, I know I'm not the only guy in the world who has ever been through something like this, but I do believe I'm in a very small and exclusive club. I think I'm one of the few people alive today who can make the claim. I woke up a sleeping dogman. He was gone and now he's back, more powerful than a computer hack, like a singer who has perfect pitch. Welcome back, channel member Butch Rude Rich. Please join us in welcoming back Butch Rude Rich, or Rude Rick, to the fold. Butch gets to enjoy our weekly Sunday Secret Uncensored stories. Here are two legendary researchers into the strange that I got to know. They were good friends, but couldn't have been more different from each other. On the left is John A. Keel, writer of the Mothman Prophecies, and inspiration for the Men in Black franchise. I remember once asking him in Central Park if his early story of chasing the Yeti across the Himalayas was exaggerated in any way for the boys' or men's magazines that he used to sell to. Keel got indignant and rose to his full height, telling me with annoyance that he never lied in print in his entire life. Years later, I had Keel's rock and roll friend here, Timothy Green Beckley, publisher of such books as Round Trip to Hell in a Flying Saucer and The Book of Werewolves, on my local TV show back in the 90s. My interviewer asked Tim if he believed everything that was in the books he put out. Tim responded, "What? Do you think I'm crazy?" Agitated Aquatic Dogman, or the Werewolf of Wolfsbane Lake. Dear Scary Stories NYC, Wolfsbane Lake is located kind of midway between upstate New York, which is famous for its Bigfoot sightings, and Michigan, which is famous for the Michigan Dogman. My buddies and I think it's kind of funny that the only place I ever saw a werewolf or a dogman was in a place with a name like that. Wolfsbane is part of those old Wolfman movies from the 1940s. It's part of the werewolf legend. The irony of me having the experience I had where I had it makes all of us wonder if there really is some kind of connection between Dogman and Wolfsbane that led to it being incorporated into the werewolf story. To clarify what I mean, a dogman, which is what I think I had a violent encounter with, is an animal that looks like a mix between a human and a canine. It is not officially recognized by science, but those who see it most often assume it to be an animal, like a wolf or a bear. There are a subset of supernatural and paranormal dogman stories, which I think you sometimes cover on your channel. The werewolf, on the other hand, is always a paranormal or supernatural thing, and that's not what I'm talking about at all here. Werewolves can change into human beings and then back into dogman-like creatures, some of them supposedly at will, while others are cursed with it happening to them against their will. I don't personally know if werewolves are for real or just from books and movies, since I don't think I've ever experienced something like that. If you know it to be real, I am not disrespecting you or your beliefs, but I don't think that is what I was dealing with on this day. What I came into contact with was taller than I was. It stood like a man, and it demonstrated territoriality. So I think it was a real creature in the normal sense. I just think it was a rare and undiscovered kind of a normal living thing. Or I should say unrecognized or unproven type of creature, since obviously it has already been discovered by so many of us. And I, like so many before me, have nothing to prove the veracity of my claims. All I've got is hearsay and fables, same as everyone else. Well, let's get on with the hearsay and fables then. I was hiking north to meet my 2 Canadian hiking buddies, who were coming down to their southwest to intercept me. We had planned to meet up 2 days after that date, and I figured I had time to divert slightly to see Wolfsbane Lake with my own eyes. I had never heard anything about this lake, but ever since I was back in the States looking at a map of this area, I really wanted to see it in person. I know that sounds childish, and I suppose it is, but the lake sounded mysterious. It looked secluded, and I just wondered if that area had a history of werewolves or loup-garou. It was my theory back then that Canadian werewolves might in fact be what Midwesterners here in the States call the Dogman. I admit that I am a Dogman fan, and I've been interested in cryptozoology since long before any of this happened. When some people hear that, they automatically assume that means I saw what I wanted to see. Now, I'm not a shrinkologist, so I can't say if that's a fair assumption or not, but I will say this. If I only saw this Dogman because I wanted to, then please explain why this is the only one I ever saw. I would have loved to have seen several before this one, and a multitude afterward. I would like to see a Dogman each week, maybe 2 during weeks when I got a day off. I would like to get to see the Dogman's family and friends. I want to know what the Dogman eats. But you know, one of the very few things I would not want to have happen between me and the Dogman is that I would rather not have him throw a big heavy rock straight at my skull. And that is what happened to me. So if that was wish fulfillment, then I must be wishing for nightmares. So here's the way it all went down. Just like people say, you probably don't actually want to meet your heroes. Sometimes they throw a rock at your head. So I got up and I left my tent at the time when my phone told me that dawn was gonna be happening, but as I walked to the shore of Wolfsbane Lake, it still looked like night to me. I felt utterly creeped out, jumping at every little forest sound. I thought I was hearing an old lady laughing at me. But then I came upon a big, weird-looking old frog, and that was what was making the sound. In person, it now sounded like a frog, but I guess my imagination turned it into an old witch in those dark woods. This lake is really one of the more isolated places I've ever been, and I was regretting not waiting until the sun was a little higher in the sky. I hadn't anticipated that trees block out sun, and so the sunrise was going to effectively be later in a location such as where I was at. I should have known that, too. I was experienced enough by that point for that to have been common knowledge to me, but I felt erratic and fuzzy-headed for about a 36-hour period while most of this was taking place. I don't know if maybe I had allergies or a cold or something in that region was messing with my nervous system somehow. I have not been able to find anything in print about people having an experience of that nature in that area, though. So it seems likely to have been some personal issue of my own. Like maybe I let my blood sugar get low, or maybe I was dehydrated and just didn't realize it. Nevertheless, it seems worth pointing out that I was feeling mildly strange, and that I was questioning my own decisions just prior to and immediately after I walked to the edge of the lake. When I did that, coming out from between two trees to the edge of the water, I got brayed at by a large, hairy animal thing standing in the water, not too far out beyond me. Now, some Dogman fans I've told this story to dislike my use of the word bray. They say a donkey brays, not a dogman. But honestly, I looked up as I heard that sound, and I expected to see a donkey in that water. My mind was already thinking how amazing it was that the donkey appeared to be standing in that water, like a man. But then my mind was thinking that the fur color didn't look like a donkey's fur color. And then, of course, this creature seemed to have hands. Like hands with fingers, human hands, not paws, and not claws either, but hands. It most certainly did not have hooves like a donkey, and yet the surprised and angry sound it made when it realized I was there sounded just like it was braying at me. When my eyes got up as far as the mouth that sound had bellowed out of, I was quite surprised to find a head more similar to a wolf than to any kind of donkey or horse. It had pointed canine ears on top, and the edges of the face had fur the same color as the rest of the body. The center of the face had progressively lightening fur, leading to a long white dog snout, which ended in a big black dog nose. It was a beautifully designed and handsome animal face, but it was twisted into an angry snarl, with large fangs exposed in a grimace. Most surprising of all to me was that when my eyes finally met his, I could see a kind of eye shine that I had never seen with my naked eye before. It was bright, but tinged in a kind of darker orange color, and it kind of blinded me a bit with its intense glare. I understood at once why some people say that Dogman's eyes seem to be lit up electrically, because that is what this looked like. Yet, that was not a mask. It was a real animal head, and the creature was standing bipedally in the water of the lake, up to its knees, not really very far from shore. I got out my cell phone, and I almost threw it out in the water in my nervousness. Turning on the photo app, I became impatient as the creature was bent down into the water, doing something. I felt like I might be about to miss my shot because of the slowness of my phone. Finally, the app came on, and I held my phone out at arm's length to aim up the shot. In a matter of seconds, I was going to have the best photo of a dogman ever taken, and I would be famous. Vic Cundiff would have me on his show. My heart was beating so fast, I had never been so nervous in my life. The voice of my father rang in my head, telling me that I would always screw up any good chance I was ever given. And then, as I fought through all of that, I was about to take the shot of a lifetime, the shot of 12 lifetimes. A rock the size of a honeydew melon slammed into the bottom half of my phone, banging up the tips of 2 fingers on my right hand and sending the phone careening forward past the legal speed limit off the top of my cranium. As the stone ricocheted to my side, landing with a big kerplunk in the water just in front of me, my phone somersaulted over my head behind me onto a sandy patch of land, cracking up upon crashdown. I remember walking back to my fallen telephone, leaning over to pick it up, and then passing out and landing face first in the dirt. That was where I took what I call an enforced nap. It was a nap that I had no choice in having. When I woke up from my nap with a concussion, I found I was face down, butt up, and every single part of my body was stiff from the stupid position I'd been splayed there in. I couldn't turn my neck from side to side until some time the next day. But the Dogman was gone, so the immediate danger seemed to be missing. It was a sunny day, and I had just finished my enforced nap, yet for some reason I was even more exhausted than before. I do think I had a concussion. I staggered back to my tent, zipped it up to provide the illusion of safety, and I think I started snoring before I even laid down. When I woke up, it was starting to get dark. I had somehow slept through most of the day. I looked around for my phone to see what time it was, but I couldn't find it inside that tent. I figured I must have left it back by the lake, which was a couple minutes of walking away. I felt very unhappy about the idea of having to walk back over there. I lost a half a day of hiking, and now I felt unsafe, too. I grabbed some trail mix because I was starving, and I climbed out of the tent with my flashlight. My intent was to walk back on the path through the woods to the lake, looking for my phone. But as soon as I got out of the tent, my flashlight caught something glinting on the ground. It was my cell phone. Or it was part of it. Then I saw another part of it, and another, and another. That phone had been split into 50 pieces, all of which had been planted, sticking out of the ground, entirely circling my tent, like a little tiny technological Stonehenge. Well, that creeped me the heck out. I packed quickly and I hiked through the night. I hiked past that lake and I kept going. I had slept so much that I had energy to spare. Plus my fear and adrenaline kept me going and going. I could sort of tell at some point that I was feeling more normal again, that my brain was going back to its average functioning. I was able to meet up with my friends only an hour or two late after our schedule, since I had a separate GPS device on me. When we regrouped, we rearranged our plans so that I could hit a city and buy a new phone. I wanted to call one of my cousins very badly, as he is as big a Dogman fan as I am, or was. To tell you the truth, I kind of feel a little differently about the Dogman since I got beamed by the creature. All I wanted was to get a selfie with him, but he treated me the way Hollywood stars treat their paparazzi. In spite of all this, when someone asks me if I still hope to see another Dogman again someday, I always answer yes. Once is never enough. That first sighting only showed me that the beast is in fact real. And if it's real, then I might be able to see one of them again someday. I just hope that if I do, that this time I see one of the friendly ones. Not like the agitated aquatic Dogman or the werewolf of Wolfsbane Lake. The Dogman ahead in the woods. Dear Scary Stories NYC. My best girl Vicky and I were walking home through Bowervik Woods in Southfield, Michigan. We had been following a trail, but then we decided to take shortcuts we knew through these woods to get us north to West 9 Mile Road a little bit faster. We were both expected at our parents' place for dinner, and we were going to be late if we didn't get a move on. As we walked places in those woods where people don't normally go, though, we came across something truly sick and creepy. There, looking like it was sitting on the ground in the bushes in the middle of nowhere, was what looked like the head of a prehistoric wolf. Only that head didn't look prehistoric. It looked new and real and current, and either still alive or only recently otherwise. It looked clean and well groomed, but it did not move. It just seemed to be staring straight ahead. Its wide open eyes looked very stressed and alert, but also a bit sad as well. Vicky and I walked semicircles around the thing from 2 angles, unable to decide what that was which we were seeing. Could it be the head of a very large wolf? Why did it look like something made in Hollywood for a horror movie? Could that be what it was? Because if it was an expensive special effects prop, that would be an awfully strange place to leave it. We looked around for movie cameras and then we looked for hidden game cameras, but if anything like that was on that scene, we did not see it. The head had fur which was colored in the kinds of grays and browns that wolf heads normally are colored by. It looked like a real creature head, but one which had been cut off from the body, with its head left behind in a wide-eyed state of frozen shock. Neither I nor my girlfriend were man enough to get any closer to the head than we already were. Finally, we decided that we should video the creature head from the safe distance we were at, and then study the video later to try to suss out what it really had been. As if the creature understood what we were saying, it rose up out of the ground, and I think I squealed at a higher pitch than Vicky did. I accidentally tossed my phone in the air. That's how surprised I was. So that was not a dog over there climbing out of the ground. Neither an ancient one, nor a modern one. It was a man-like creature from the neck on down, but the entire thing was covered in the same dark fur as that prehistoric wolf head up on top. The reason I say it was not a dog was because this thing had shoulders in the way that a man does. It climbed out of the dirt so quickly that we could see that it was a hole or a hunting blind, which the creature had been hiding his body inside of. He left his head out of the ground on purpose, in order to make stupid creatures like us curious about it. It held still on purpose so as to seem like less of a threat. I think its hope and intention was to get us close enough that it could drag us down into its underworld with it. But we didn't do that. We didn't get any closer. The threat of us photographing and recording it seems to be what drew it out, and that had to have been the reason that it then chased us. We ran back toward where we knew the path was, just because it's easier for humans to move on paths, and easier for wild predators to move through thick vegetation. The creature followed us, and we could hear him behind. At one point I turned, and I got a glimpse of the beast in its entirety. It was so big that Vicky later called it ginormous. She doesn't call anything else in her life ginormous. Well, except her sister's butt. But that is also very deserving of the term. I can't even begin to fathom the size of that. But in the Dogman's case, he was probably 9 or 10 feet tall. The creature was also built pretty massively, but I'm not going to tell you that it looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger or anything like that. It probably weighed twice what Arnold weighs anyhow. This was much larger than any human being. When we hit the path running, we both noticed the immediate and complete change in background noise. It sounded like we'd walked from one reality to another, and this one was much quieter. Not quiet as in when the crickets stop chirping because there's a predator nearby, but quiet as in pleasant and relaxed. We couldn't hear the Dogman chasing us anymore either, which made us both curious. Well, it made Vicky curious at least. She dragged me back slowly to where we could get a view of the place we had originally seen that Dogman had. Vicky whispered to me that she wanted to see that hunting blind up close and see how big it was. Was it just large enough to fit the one Dogman? Or did it, as she suspected, lead to an underground tunnel system and maybe a small city of cave dogmen? We maneuvered close enough to get a side angle on that hole in the ground, but we were disappointed to see that wolf head was back sticking up out of the hole. It stared straight forward, and once again, it was holding perfectly still. We figured we were lucky to see what we saw, and we split out of there to go have dinner with Vicky's folks. And so far at least that's the only cryptid that either one of us have ever seen. But of course, at first, we thought that we were only seeing the Dogman head in the woods. Tim Walker, top-tier channel member. He thought we'd forget, but we remember. There's no one more badass than him. I'm talking about Godzilla Tim. Please join us in thanking Godzilla Tim for being one of our top members for one of the longest times. Tim literally has joined us several times over. He is one of the most generous men in the world. And with the way YouTube has decided to step on the neck of our channel starting in February, we literally won't survive much longer without the help of kind individuals like Godzilla Tim. Thank you, Tim. You are a lifesaver. I was driving on a dark road somewhere in Wisconsin. I don't recall where. This had to have been 40 or 45 years ago now. I just had a flat tire about 10 minutes earlier, and ever since I got back on the road, I was hearing something loose banging around in my trunk. I went over the recent events in my head. I got a flat tire, I pulled off the road, I opened the trunk, got out the jack and the spare tire, did the deed, then I tossed the tools and tire in the trunk and slammed it shut. So what was loose back there? I pulled off the road again, got out, opened the trunk, and bam, I was run over by a North American upright walking canine who had somehow gotten himself into my trunk to take a nap while I was changing the tire. It seemed to be a bit shorter than me, so it had to have been a juvenile. My advice to you, if you're changing your tire at night in Wisconsin, is this: close your trunk when you aren't watching it. Street fightin' Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. When I was young, my grandfather used to tell us stories about the old days when he was a dock worker in Chicago and a few other places in the Midwest. One of the stories might be interesting to you, I think, because it involves an animal that he described as a wolfaroo. Personally, I think it was a werewolf or upright dogman, but you can decide that for yourself. This story stretches back a long way, possibly over 100 years ago. It happened sometime after World War I, but before the Great Depression. I'm not really sure of the actual dates, and my grandpa's gone now, so I can't ask him. But it's in that range of the late teens to the early 30s somewhere. Now, Grandpa used to tell us stories about a boxing kangaroo that fought in these sort of underground fight club scenarios back north of Chicago in those olden days. Actually, he said there were a couple of different fighting kangaroos over the years. But then there was a far harder to beat boxing animal called the wolfaroo, which was not imported from Australia at all. The wolfaroo was said to have come down from northern Wisconsin, or maybe Michigan. The legend about him was that some lumberjacks cut down a tall tree that he had been hiding up inside of. When it came down, so did the creature, and the fall knocked it out. The men captured the unconscious beast, and they attached boxing gloves to his dangerous, clawed, hand-like paws before he could wake up. Soon he was being trained to fight and the way that animals used in dog or rooster fights are trained. That Dogman may not have had use of his claws anymore, but he became an even angrier and more dangerous animal after each training round and each new prize fight, for which he never got to share in the prize. By the time that creature had gotten far enough south for my grandfather to have seen him fight, there was no longer question that he was unstoppable and unbeatable. The point had ceased being whether anyone could defeat the creature in a boxing match, but instead how long they could survive without either being seriously injured or else escaping the ring and running away to fight another day. I asked Grandpa why he was called a wolfaroo. Did he hop like a kangaroo? Grandpa admitted that he hadn't really ever thought about the name before, but he guessed it was probably because there had been a few boxing kangaroos that the men of that era might have heard of. But nobody within then living memory had seen a creature like this, fighting in secret venues against ordinary human males. This was something like a wolf, but a wolf who could stand up like a kangaroo and box 10 rounds. The name wolfaroo must have been a shortening of wolf-headed kangaroo. Nevertheless, Grandpa said it did not have kangaroo legs, and it did not hop. It walked on its hind legs more like a bear than a kangaroo, but not really like either. That sounds to me like a pretty decent description of a possible historic Dogman. Grandpa said that the wolfaroo didn't always fight according to Marquis of Queensberry rules. For instance, one time when the creature seemed to grow tired of a fight that was too evenly matched, it started biting its opponent on the neck and shoulder. That was really the only way to defeat the Wolfman boxer. You had to get him to seriously injure you. Then you'd win by default, as long as the ref saw the creature doing the dirty deed. I remember asking Grandpa if there might be surviving posters or newspaper articles about these fights, but he only grew very defensive about the subject, saying that I was calling him a liar. I was not. I merely wanted to find out more about the creature, if it did in fact exist. That's all. I asked him how he would know a fight was going to happen if it wasn't in the newspaper, and he said there were handouts, some kind of paper that was passed around, which informed people of fight events and locations. So to me that sounds like there might in fact be some bit of evidence somewhere that proves this is in fact something that was once for real. Now, my initial understanding was that the boxing Dogman competed by the Chicago docks, and that the fights were organized by the dock workers themselves. Grandpa, though, in the last time we got to talk about this, elaborated on and corrected the version of history I had internalized. The fighting did not, in fact, take place on the docks. It took place near or in what would now be the Captain Daniel Wright Woods Forest Preserve. The exact location seemed to shift around one given area, maybe moving on when police presence arrived, or when the fighters and the audience got drunker. I was never exactly clear on that part. Like, Grandpa would tell of the Dogman kangaroo beating up a man in a basement, with men standing around making bets, with cash, as the battle raged on. But then he'd be telling me about a fight where all the men were gathered in the woods over there, watching and betting. There was also a story of a man fighting the wolfaroo right out in the street, at night, with the crowd slowly gathering as word of mouth spread. Apparently you could stage an event like that with no advanced planning or warning, make a profit off of taking people's bets, and then skedaddle out of there when the law showed up to shut you down. Another thing that Grandpa cleared up was that this was not run by the dock workers, although plenty of the guys laying down their cash to bet probably were working the docks. This was just a phenomenon which factory workers, sailors, and other working class guys would attend as entertainment. Grandpa told us about one time when the wolfaroo got a little hot under the collar at its owners, for some reason that he and his buddies didn't see. What they did see was the creature refused to climb into the back of the truck that they moved him around in. As bad as the fights could get, the place they took him afterward must have been even worse. because that Wolfman boxer did not want to get back into that truck to go back wherever that was. According to my grandpa, the Wolfaroo fought off 3 men at once, as no one man was a match for him. At first, brave men from the crowd volunteered to try to help subdue the creature, but as more and more of them fell to the side, either injured or outright unconscious, the number of willing volunteers dwindled. If Grandpa's version of events was really true, that creature would use one man as a bowling ball and the rest of the men as bowling pins, as he was supposed to be much taller and heftier than any human. He was even able to battle off multiple men for a long time, before finally becoming exhausted enough to be pushed and shoved back into the truck, to be brought back to whatever hellhole served as the poor creature's home. One night, Grandpa overheard some men talking about trying to drug the Wolfaroo before a fight. This way they could bet against him and win. Grandpa was invited to become part of the plan, but declined and backed away from the plotters. Grandpa said he watched the men entering the area which led to the Wolfaroo being held in his cage. Seconds later, he saw the men running right back out of that area, their faces pale and aghast. The idea of anyone even being able to get very close to the beast at all was laughable. The Wolfaroo was the king of the Midwestern jungle. I asked Grandpa if he knew whatever became of the boxing Dogman, and he thought about it for a while, then shrugged. It was just one of those things from that time, from that era. Asking where the Dogman went is like asking where the Lindy went, or the Hop, or the Peppermint Twist. It was something that belonged to one place and time. When you were later living in a different place and time, you just didn't think about that any longer. Did kids in the 80s waste their time thinking about Studebakers? If there are any underground fight scenes that the modern day equivalent of tough guys like my grandfather go to watch and to bet on, I wonder if there are any modern day equivalents of the Wolfaroo. Because, in spite of all the danger, I really would find it an incredible thrill to get to see something like my grandpa witnessed. I'd love to, just once, get to see a 21st century version of the street fightin' Dogman. He's a monkey who hosts YouTube movies. Everybody loves him and thinks he's groovy. Mr. Spinks with 2 exclamation marks. He always hits it out of the park. Please join me in thanking Mr. Spinks for being a channel member of our channel now for a full year. Mr. Spinks gets to see our weekly Sunday Secret Uncensored stories, such as this week's gory story, My Girlfriend is a Werewolf. If you'd like to see that too, then just listen to what our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Dogman, has to say. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.